Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we sail to the age of Portuguese exploration. Feel the cool, smooth brass of the compass beneath your thumb. Breathe in the sharp, ozone-laden tang of salt spray carried on the restless Atlantic breeze. And let history rock you to sleep aboard the creaking timbers of a caravel bound for the edge of the known world. Will your eyelids grow heavy as the Sagres dips into a deep trough, the groan of her rigging a familiar lullaby? You are Medius, the navigator, keeper of the secrets whispered on the wind and etched onto precious vellum. The precious portolan chart, illuminated by a single, guttering oil lamp lashed securely to the chart table, lies spread before you, its edges curling slightly in the damp air. Your fingers, calloused from rope and salt, trace the intricate web of kriss, crossing lines radiating from the central compass rose, a riot of color depicting the faces of the winds. Tramontana, Greco, Levante. These are the rum lines, the very soul of this chart, painstakingly drawn to guide you towards any port, any headland, once you knew the wind's direction. Unlike later maps based on mathematical projections, these portolan charts were born directly from the lived experience of sailors like you, meticulously recording coastlines and hazards as seen from the deck. The brass compass trembles in its wooden binnacle, the lodestone within pulling the needle inexorably north, a cold, constant point in the swirling chaos of the sea. You compare its steady bearing to the chart's orientation, feeling the reassuring solidity of the instrument against your palm. Outside, the night is a velvet cloak pricked with a million diamond stars. Vega, Polaris, the Southern Cross slowly revealing itself as you plunge further south. You plot their positions against the imagined horizon, cross-referencing with the chart's notations scribbled in the margins by hands long dust. Strong currents here. Good anchorage, sweet water. The chart itself is a palimpsest of voyages, its coastlines Africa's bulging western curve, the jagged teeth of the Azores rendered with astonishing accuracy for its time. Yet fantastical beasts still lurk in uncharted waters. Warning, here be serpents. The scent of the sea is ever present, sharp and vital, mingling with the lamp oil and the faint, musty aroma of the treated sheepskin parchment beneath your hands. The ship rolls, a deep, rhythmic motion that resonates in your bones. Timbers creak like old joints, ropes thrum against masts, and the sea hisses along the hull, a constant, shushing counterpoint to the wind's mournful song in the rigging. Your eyes drift from the precise lines of the chart to the dark porthole, seeing not glass, but the vast, indifferent oceans stretching into infinity. The weight of responsibility guiding these men, this fragile wooden world, through trackless waters towards rumored lands of spice and gold, sits heavily. Yet there's a profound peace in the ritual, in the silent communion with the stars and the steady pull of the compass. You know dawn will bring squalls perhaps, or becalmed frustration, but for now, under the watchful gaze of the constellations, the Sagres rides the swells, and the portolan chart, illuminated like a sacred text, holds the promise of horizons yet unseen. The rhythmic creak of the hull deepens, becoming the very heartbeat of the ocean itself, lulling your thoughts towards the warm darkness behind your eyes as the lamp flame dances, casting long, swaying shadows across the vellum sea. The chart's intricate details blur slightly as fatigue tugs at your resolve, the precise lines of the Iberian coast softening into a comforting haze. Your hand, resting near the chart's edge, feels the subtle texture of the vellum, slightly pebbled, resilient against the damp, a testament to the careful preparation of the sheepskin. Crafted by skilled mappe mundi, artisans in Lisbon or Sager's workshops. These charts were invaluable state secrets, often passed down through generations of navigators or jealously guarded by the crown. The brass compass, cool and heavy, remains a fixed point in the gently swaying cabin, its polished surface reflecting the dim, dancing flame. You recall the long months learning its language, understanding how the needle's slight tremble could indicate shifting sands below or a hidden iron deposit ashore. Knowledge as crucial as the stars themselves. Outside, the sound of the watch changing drifts down, muffled voices, the thud of boots on deck, a brief, haunting snatch of a shanty carried away on the wind. The salt spray scent intensifies briefly as a wave crashes against the hull, a fine mist finding its way through the seams, mingling with the ever-present wood smoke smell from the galley stove, long cold now. You shift your gaze back to the Southern Cross, its 4 bright stars a clearer beacon now. Plotting its angle against the horizon, you make a minor adjustment to your mental course, whispering the bearing to the empty cabin. The chart confirms it. A cluster of small, inked crosses mark a safe passage just west of a sketched reef. Annotated. Soundings good. Sandy bottom. The ship heels slightly, responding to a shift in the wind captured by the night watch adjusting the sails. The movement is smooth, purposeful. You imagine the men aloft, dark silhouettes against the star, flecked sky, securing lines, their movements practiced and silent. The vastness outside the thin wooden walls feels less daunting now, more like an embrace. The portolan chart is more than mere directions. It's a tapestry woven from countless voyages, from whispered warnings and hard-won discoveries. Each harbor drawn, each promontory named, represents men who sailed before, their triumphs and losses etched into this skin. Your own small marks, a new inlet sketched tentatively. A corrected depth, sounding feel like adding a single, fragile thread to that grand tapestry. The rhythmic thrum of the hull against the water deepens, synchronizing with your own slowing heartbeat. The constellations seem to pulse gently in the ink, black sky, their ancient light a constant companion. The brass compass remains unwavering, its north seeking needle a silent vow in the quiet cabin. The lamp flame flickers, casting elongated, dancing shapes that merge with the chart's coastlines, turning Africa's outline into a slumbering giant beside the ship. The sounds of the sea, the sighing waves, the groan of timber, the distant clink of rigging blend into a single, profound melody, a lullaby older than time itself. The precise calculations fade, replaced by a deep, instinctive trust in the ship, the stars, the chart, and the steady hand guiding the compass needle homeward. Your breath slows, matching the rise and fall of the deck beneath your feet, each exhalation carrying away the day's tension, leaving only the cool brass under your fingertips and the vast, star-salted silence of the ocean night. The portolan chart, bathed in the lamp's golden glow, seems to hum with the quiet knowledge of 1,000 safe passages, its rum lines converging, like paths to peaceful harbors in the mind as the Southern Cross climbs higher, a silent sentinel watching over the dreaming ship. The gentle rocking intensifies momentarily as the Sagres meets a series of larger swells, the timbers groaning a deeper protest before settling back into the familiar, soporific rhythm. Your fingers, almost of their own accord, trace the delicate wind rose-painted near the Cape Verde Islands, 16 points, each named for the wind that breathed life into it. Lebeccio, Sirocco, Mistral. The colors are still vibrant even in the low-light vermilion, azurite, gold leaf catching the lamplight. These elaborate roses weren't merely decorative, they were essential for visualizing wind direction, and planning complex courses using the intersecting Ruhum lines, a system perfected by Mediterranean mariners long before Portuguese caravels ventured south. The brass compass, nestled in its gimbals, remains steadfast, a cool, reassuring anchor against your skin. You recall the day this very chart was entrusted to you in the hushed chambers of the Order of Christ, the weight of expectation as heavy as the vellum itself. The smell of the sea is momentarily overlaid by the phantom scent of beeswax and incense from that solemn room. A louder crash of water against the hull sends a fine spray through the cabin, the salt tang sharp and invigorating, mingling with the lamp's smoky wick. You instinctively shield the chart with your sleeve, the precious vellum repelling the moisture, a testament to the master parchment maker's skill. Glancing up through the stern window, you see the moon has risen, a pale, gibbous disk casting a shimmering silver highway across the dark water towards the horizon the chart promises lies beyond. Its cold light bleaches the color from the cabin, turning the portolan into a ghostly landscape of grays and blacks, the rum lines like spider silk glistening with dew. The sounds of the night watch are fainter now, just the constant companionable noises of the ship at sea, water rushing, wood settling, wind humming in the stays. The Southern Cross hangs lower, its pointer stars almost touching the dark rim of the world sketched on your chart. You calculate the distance run since the last stellar sighting, the numbers forming slowly in your tired mind, matching well with the chart's scale and the sand in the half-hourglass beside you. The ship feels like a living creature, breathing with the swell, trusting you to guide it true. Your eyelids are leaden weights. The detailed coastlines of Guinea on the chart blur into soft smudges of sepia ink. The compass beneath your thumb feels less like a tool and more like an extension of your own pulse. A steady beat against the rolling thunder of the waves. The responsibility, the vastness, the unknown, they recede, replaced by an immense quietude. You are a tiny point on a vast ocean, yet connected to every mariner who ever trusted a portolan's lines, every soul who sought the horizon. The lamp flame gutters lower, its light shrinking to a warm, golden pool that seems to cradle the chart, protecting its secrets. The rhythmic creak of the mast step directly above your head becomes a soothing, repetitive chant. The cold brass compass steadies your drifting thoughts, its unwavering north a fixed star in the encroaching drowsiness. The scent of salt is the scent of the world, vast and ancient, rocking you as gently as a mother rocks her child. The final, distinct thought before consciousness slips its moorings is the comforting solidity of the ship's timbers beneath you, carrying you forward into the moonlit embrace of the Atlantic, guided by the silent wisdom of the stars and the intricate, sleeping map. The portolan chart's final visible landmark, a tiny sketched anchor off a nameless bay, seems to beckon you towards rest, its lines softening into the welcoming darkness behind your eyes as the ship sighs deeply, cradled by the deep ocean swell. The chart remained spread beneath the dancing lamplight, its vellum sea now a landscape of shifting shadows as the Sagres shouldered through the deepening night. Métisha stirred, not fully woken, but pulled from the depths of slumber by a subtle change in the ship's rhythm. The comforting groan of timbers had tightened, the pitch of the wind in the rigging rising half an octave. His hand, still resting near the compass, felt the brass grow fractionally colder as a new draught snaked through the cabin's seams, carrying a denser, wetter iteration of salt spray. He blinked, the dream image of that sketched anchor dissolving into the stark reality of ink and vellum. Outside, the moon's silver highway had vanished, swallowed by a bank of sea fog rolling in with silent, suffocating speed. It pressed against the stern windows like damp wool, muffling the world beyond, reducing visibility to the ghostly sheen of the ship's own lantern light on the swirling gray. The familiar coastline on the chart, the reassuring bulge of Sierra Leone, felt suddenly theoretical, separated from him by this impenetrable veil. These vital charts, though astonishingly accurate for prominent coastal features thanks to generations of accumulated pilotage, offered no guidance for open ocean fog. Their strength lay in the visible landmarks and soundings meticulously recorded along the shore. His fingers found the compass again, its cool solidity an anchor in the disorientation. The needle, illuminated by the guttering lamp, held true. North, always north. That unwavering point was his lifeline now. He strained his ears, listening beyond the ship's own noises, the slap of wet canvas being reefed, muffled shouts from the deck for the treacherous sigh of breakers on unseen rocks. The smell shifted, the clean ozone tang replaced by the clammy, organic scent of dense fog, mingling unpleasantly with the lamp's greasy smoke and the underlying must of the chart. Crafted for clarity above all, Portolands employed strict color codes. Vital ports, blazed in vermilion red, river mouths and smaller havens marked in cool azure blue, while place names marched in dense black script. Along the coasts, a silent, urgent language against the vellum. He traced a crimson dot marking São Jorge de Mina, their next intended landfall, impossibly distant in this blindness. The ship wallowed in a trough, the chart momentarily tilting, its treated sheepskin surface repelling the condensation beating on its surface. This reliance on durable vellum wasn't mere tradition, it was necessity, as the charts faced constant exposure to spray, damp, and rough handling in the cramped, rolling chart rooms of caravels like the Sagres. Mattis's mind raced, calculating time run and estimated drift. Cross, referencing the last star sighting with the sandglass. The rum lines radiated from their wind roses, potential paths through chaos, but without a sight of sun, moon, or shore, they were abstract. He breathed deeply, the damp air chilling his throat. Survival depended on dead reckoning, the compass bearing. The log line's hesitant tale of speed, the feel of the current against the hull, and the mariner's ingrained sense of the sea's rhythm. He adjusted the course slightly, calling the change up the companionway, his voice sounding thin and strange in the muffled world. The Sagres creaked in response, turning her shoulder to the swell. The fog pressed closer, dampening sound and spirit alike, turning the cabin into a solitary, lamplit island. The Portolan chart, with its defiantly precise coastlines and vibrant ports, seemed almost a taunt now, a map of a world that had temporarily ceased to exist beyond the ship's fragile wooden walls. Yet, beneath his palm, the compass needle held its silent, magnetic vigil. That constant pull, combined with the chart's meticulously recorded truth of what should lie beyond the gray, was the fragile thread tethering them to safety. He kept his hand on the cool brass, feeling the ship's movements translated through the gimbals. Listening. Always listening for the sea's whispered warnings or the hopeful cry of a lookout spotting a break in the murk. The lamp flame dipped and swayed, casting long, leaping shadows that made the chart's inked serpents in the southern voids seem to writhe. Fatigue warred with vigilance, the rhythmic thump of waves against the bow a hypnotic counterpoint to his straining senses. The salt, fog smell was pervasive, coating his tongue, seeping into his woolen tunic. Gradually, imperceptibly, the ship's motion began to ease, the wind's pitch softening. The oppressive blanket of fog seemed to thin, no longer swallowing the lantern light whole, but merely dimming it. A patch of profound blackness appeared briefly overhead, a glimpse of stars, before swirling gray closed over again. It was a fleeting promise, but enough. The immediate tension bled from Medius's shoulders. They were holding their course. The coast, though unseen, was still there, faithfully rendered on the vellum sea beneath his wary gaze. The compass needle, unwavering in its tiny pool of light, pointed the way through the lingering gloom, its cold touch a silent reassurance against his skin as the ship settled back into a watchful, waiting rhythm. The intricate red ports and blue rivers on the chart blurred once more, not with sleep, but with the stinging residue of salt spray and the profound relief of having navigated the unseen. The muffled sounds of the ship became a lullaby again, the brass compass a steady heartbeat against the vast, damp quiet of the shrouded ocean. The fog's clammy embrace softened into something almost gentle, a cool caress on his face as he rested his forehead against the chart table's worn edge, the scent of wet wool and sea mist merging with the lingering lamp oil and the ancient, resilient parchment. The thin, persistent wail of the bosun's pipe pierced the lingering damp, a shrill counterpoint to the rhythmic slap of water against the Sagres's hull. Metetius blinked, the stiffness in his neck protesting as he lifted his head from the chart table's worn wood. Dawn had bled through the dissipating fog, transforming the world outside the stern windows from suffocating gray to a luminous, pearlescent haze. The portolan chart, freed from the oppressive gloom, seemed to breathe again, its colors reasserting themselves. In the strengthening light, the deep indigo of the ocean, the ochre wash of the African coastline, the defiant crimson of marked ports. Unlike later maps constrained by strict latitude and longitude grids, the portolan's freedom allowed navigators to record the actual sailing time between landmarks, crucial knowledge passed between pilots, often noted in the margins as days sail with fair wind. His fingers, stiff and chilled, sought the brass compass. It was no longer cold. The first weak rays of the sun slanting through the glass had warmed its smooth surface. He turned it slightly, watching the needle tremble and settle, its unwavering north a silent testament to the unseen forces guiding them. The scent had shifted utterly, the clammy fog, breath replaced by the sharp, clean tang of ozone and wet hemp drying in the sun, undercut by the rich, earthy aroma of distant land, damp soil, and dense, unknown vegetation carried miles out to sea on the morning breeze. Land, not just a sketched line, but a scent, a promise. Shouts echoed from above, clear and urgent now the fog had lifted. Land ho, fine on the starboard bow. Cape Palmas, relief, warm and liquid, washed through Medius. They had held true. He leaned over the chart, his calloused finger finding the distinctive promontory, jutting defiantly into the vellum sea, exactly where the compass and dead reckoning had promised it would be. The accuracy of prominent capes, like this on portolans, stemmed from countless pilots taking cross bearings, sighting the landmark from different positions at sea and triangulating its precise location relative to known points. The intricate rum lines converging near the cape suddenly made visceral sense. They weren't just abstract paths, but highways carved by countless ships seeking this very headland. The ship came alive around him. Bare feet pounded on the deck above. Sails cracked as they were sheeted home, the Sagres leaning eagerly into the freshening wind, her timbers groaning with renewed purpose. The rhythmic labor of the pumps began again, a steady clank, thud as bilge water was expelled. Macius carefully rolled the precious chart, securing it with a leather thong. Its job for this leg was done. The coastline itself was now his guide. He climbed the companionway ladder, the blinking in the sudden brilliance. The world was awash with liquid gold. The sea, no longer a menacing void, sparkled under the climbing sun. Ahead, a dark, forested mass resolved into the unmistakable shape of Cape Palmas, its lower slopes wreathed in trailing veils of mist rising from the jungle. Seabirds wheeled and shrieked, riding the thermals. The air vibrated with the sound of surf crashing against unseen shores, a deep, rhythmic boom carried across the miles. He joined the captain at the starboard rail, the warm wood smooth beneath his palms. "A fine sight, navigator," the captain murmured, his eyes fixed on the growing landmass. "Your chart and your needle held us true through the blindness." Macius simply nodded, the cool morning air filling his lungs, scarred clean by the vanished fog, carrying that potent cocktail of salt and verdant earth. He raised the brass compass, its polished surface catching the sun, and sighted along its edge towards the cape, confirming the bearing visually. This practice of shooting a bearing directly with the compass, aligning the instrument with a visible landmark, was fundamental for confirming position and plotting the next leg on the portolan once sight was restored. The warmth of the brass seeped into his hand, no longer just a tool, but a companion that had whispered constancy through the disorienting night. Below decks, the scent of boiling salted beef and ship's biscuit began to mingle with the salt and jungle air. The rhythmic creak of the hull was now the sound of progress, of a promise kept. The vast, trackless ocean of the fog-shrouded night had shrunk, tamed by the visible curve of the earth and the unwavering point of magnetic north, held within the circle of cool, sun-warmed brass in Macius's hand. The distant boom of the surf became the drumbeat of the approaching continent, a lullaby of arrival replacing the anxious hymn of the open sea. The intricate web of the portolan's rum lines seemed to pulse faintly in his mind's eye, converging now on the solid reality of the approaching coast, a testament to the fragile, enduring power of human knowledge etched on resilient sheepskin, guided by a sliver of magnetized iron pointing ever northward. The ship surged forward, her sails full, carving a path through the glittering blue towards the beckoning, scent-laden shore. The navigator's vigilance momentarily eased by the tangible certainty of land under the climbing African sun. The Sagres settled into a steady southeasterly course, keeping the verdant, mist-shrouded coastline a cautious league off the starboard beam. Cape Palmas, a dark sentinel crowned with ragged palms, slowly receded astern, its form shrinking against the immense backdrop of the African continent. Macius, back at the chart table below, had unfurled the portolan once more. Daylight streamed through the stern windows now, illuminating the vellum with a clarity impossible in the guttering lamplight, revealing subtle details, faint pencil annotations, minute corrections, the slight variations in ink density where different hands had added knowledge over decades. This collaborative nature, where pilots added their own discoveries to existing charts, sometimes even scraping away old ink, Delos palimpsest, made each portolan a unique, evolving document of shared maritime experience. The smell below decks had shifted again, the damp wool and salt tang overlaid now by the pungent aroma of tar heating in the sun on the deck above, a sharp, resinous scent that seeped through the planking, mingling with the lingering earthiness from the nearby shore. The brass compass, reflecting a bright sliver of sunlight, felt warm and alive in his hand. He plotted their position meticulously. using the known bearing of the Cape as a fixed point. He measured the distance, run, with the log line, counting the knots paid out over the sandglass's measured run, and marked their estimated position with a faint, careful dot of charcoal. The rhythmic thump of the lead line being cast from the chains forward echoed down, followed by the sing-song cry of the leadsman. By the deep 20 fathoms, good holding ground, sandy bottom. He noted it mentally, referencing with the soundings marked near their position on the chart a cluster of small numbers and symbols meaning sandy bottom, safe anchorage. These depth soundings, crucial for avoiding hidden shoals, were often recorded using symbols, dots for sand, small crosses for shells or shingle, tiny anchors for good holding ground, forming a silent, practical language on the vellum. The coastline unfurled on the chart with astonishing fidelity, the sweeping curve of a vast bay, the sharp inlet of a river mouth rendered in cool blue, a cluster of crimson dots marking a known trading settlement just beyond the next headland. He traced the line with his finger, feeling the slight grain of the vellum. The distant, rhythmic boom of surf was a constant companion now, a reminder of the unseen reefs and beaches paralleling their course. The ship felt different in coastal waters, more alert, more responsive to the subtle shifts in current and wind funneled by the land. The cry of unfamiliar birds, harsh and exotic, carried across the water. The smell of the land grew richer, more complex damp earth, decaying vegetation, wood smoke from unseen fires, and occasionally, a faint, acrid scent he couldn't name. The sun climbed higher, warming the cabin. Beads of sweat pricked Machis's brow as he labored over the chart. The brass compass, warmed by both sun and his grip, felt like an extension of his own focused intent. He sighted a distinctive, twin, peaked hill rising from the coastal jungle, noted its bearing, and plotted it precisely against the chart's depiction. A perfect match. The relief was profound, a quiet validation of their position and the chart's enduring accuracy. This constant cross-checking of visible landmarks against the charted coastline was the navigator's daily bread, a practice demanding acute observation and unwavering trust in the accumulated knowledge preserved on the treated skin. Outside, the rhythmic work of the ship continued, the creak of the helm, the flap and draw of canvas, the distant chant of men hauling on a brace. The vast, indifferent ocean of the open Atlantic felt like a memory. Here, the sea was colored by the proximity of the immense, teeming land. Flying fish skittered like silver shards across the wave tops. The water itself seemed to change color, shifting from deep oceanic blue to a lighter, greener hue closer to shore. The Portolan chart was no longer a theoretical guide to the unknown, but a practical roadmap, its every curve and notation a direct instruction. Matius felt a deep connection to the generations of pilots whose eyes had scanned this same coast, whose hands had added marks to charts like this one, whose knowledge now guided the Sagres safely south. The cool brass compass was his conduit to that lineage, a constant point of reference in the vibrant, demanding theater of coastal navigation. The scent of tar and distant wood smoke, the cry of alien birds, the solid warmth of the instrument in his hand, the precise black lines on the resilient vellum, they all wove together into a tapestry of purposeful motion. The ship pressed on, her timbers groaning contentedly, carrying the scent of Portugal, the promise of spices, and the silent, guiding wisdom of the Portolan Sea towards the next crimson dot on the vellum horizon. The rhythmic thump of the lead line, a steady heartbeat marking their progress along the ancient, charted shore. The twin, peaked hill slid astern, replaced by a low, mangrove, choked estuary marked in azure blue on the chart. Its brackish scent carried faintly on the warm, land-laden breeze as the sun began its slow, golden descent towards the western sea. The portolan chart grows heavy beneath Machias's sun-warmed hand, its vibrant coasts and rum lines softening into a golden haze as the African sun dips towards the horizon, painting the cabin in long, amber shadows. The brass compass, still cradled in his palm, reflects the dying light, a cool, steady point in the encroaching dusk. The scent of the day, salt spray, sun, warm tar, distant jungle earth, and the rich, oily aroma of the chart's treated vellum mellows into the evening air, blending with the first cool breath of the offshore breeze. Outside, the rhythmic thump of the lead line ceases. The Sagres eases into a gentle swell, her sails loosened for the night watch. Distant seabirds call their last, haunting cries over the darkening water. The immense silhouette of the coast is now a velvet shadow against a sky streaked with lavender and rose, the precise details swallowed by twilight. Machias's fingers linger on the compass's edge, feeling the familiar grooves worn by generations of navigators. The intricate calculations, the constant vigilance, the press of the unknown, they recede like the tide. The chart before him is no longer just a map. It's a testament to journeys made, trust placed in stars and lodestone, and the fragile, enduring connection between human skill and the vast, whispering ocean. He traces the final crimson, dot marking their next anchorage, a promise for tomorrow, now blurred by fatigue and the day's warmth held in the brass. The ship sighs, a deep, contented sound. The sounds of the crew settling for the night, muffled voices, the clink of a lantern, the soft creak of the helm become distant. Echoes. The cool metal of the compass seems to seep into his bones, a grounding weight. The scent of salt is deep and ancient now, the scent of rest after labor. The portolan's intricate lines dissolve entirely, merging with the warm darkness behind his eyes. The steady pull of the compass needle, pointing ever north, becomes the only constant, a silent lullaby in the quiet cabin. Machias's world fades into the gentle rhythm of the deep Atlantic swell. The creak of the Sagres' timbers a cradle, the unwavering compass a final, silent star in his mind's darkening sky. The vast, charted sea dissolves into the deeper ocean of sleep. Carry this piece of ancient voyages, of brass warmed by sun and purpose, of vellum holding 1,000 shores within its skin. Sleep well, time weaver. Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight we sail to the golden age of Piracy. Feel the rough, fibrous bite of hemp rope beneath your calloused palms. Breathe in the thick, acrid tang of hot tar mingling with the sweet, fiery burn of overproof rum, and let history rock you to sleep aboard the Sea Serpent, where cutlasses sing and surgeons barter with death. Your eyelids grow heavy as the Sea Serpent heals violently, timbers groaning like a beast in pain. You are Silas Thorne, ship's surgeon, or as close as these desperate men get to one. Not a learned physician, but a man who knows his herbs, his knife, and the grim arithmetic of survival. The reek of battle hangs, thick gunpowder's bitter sting, the coppery tang of fresh blood soaking the deck planking above, and beneath it all, the ever-present bass notes of bilge water, rat droppings, and unwashed bodies crammed below. Your sanctuary is a cramped corner near the galley, lit by a single, guttering tallow dip. Before you, stained dark with countless concoctions, rests your most vital tools, the heavy stone mortar and pestle. Crafted from durable, non-porous basalt or marble, these apothecaries' tools were essential aboard ship, Their rough inner surfaces allowed surgeons to efficiently grind dried herbs, roots, and minerals into fine powders or pastes, releasing vital medicinal compounds. Your hands, already slick with sweat and someone else's blood, grip the smooth, cool weight of the pestle. You scoop a handful of dried, brittle willow bark strips, precious cargo bartered for in Tortuga, into the mortar's bowl. The scent is faintly astringent, woody, promising pain relief. Outside your cramped space, chaos rains screams, curses, the thunderous boom of another broadside shaking the ship to her keel. The frantic thump, thump, thump of bare feet on wood, as men rush to stations. A spray of seawater, cold and shocking, sluices down the companionway steps, mixing with the grime on the deck. You begin to grind, the rhythmic crunch. Scrape. Crunch, scrape of stone on bark cutting through the din, a small, focused ritual against the madness. Willow bark, rich in salicin, a precursor to modern aspirin, was a staple for surgeons like Silas, used to dull the agony of wounds and fevers rampant in the close, filthy quarters of a pirate vessel. The rough hemp rope binding a nearby crate of musket balls digs into your elbow as you brace against the ship's next lurch. The mortar shifts. You clamp it firmly with your other hand, the cool, unyielding stone a constant against the ship's violent motion. The smell of hot tar being hastily slapped onto a shot, hole near the waterline wafts strongly now, a thick, pungent, almost resinous cloud that battles the gunpowder stink. You add a pinch of dried poppy heads to the mortar, their faint, narcotic sweetness barely perceptible. Opium poppies were another common, if dangerous, item in a ship surgeon's chest, offering powerful sedation for amputations or grievous injuries, though dosages were often guesswork leading to addiction or death. Crunch, scrape, crunch, scrape. You pour in a splash of the ship's cheapest, most potent rum, not for drinking, but to extract the compounds, the sharp, alcoholic vapor rising instantly, mingling pungently with the other smells. The mixture becomes a thick, dark paste. The cries from above intensify, they're bringing the wounded down. A boy, pale as salt, clutching a shattered arm slick with gore, is half dragged, half fallen near your station. His eyes, wide with terror, fix on your mortar. You dip a filthy rag into the paste. Bite the rope, lad. You rasp, nodding to a loose end of hemp line nearby. The coarse fibers would give his teeth purchase against the coming torment. The crunch, scrape stops. The mortar and pestle, coated in the life-altering paste, sit heavily in the swaying dip light, instruments of mercy as brutal as any cutlass in the bloody twilight of the pirate surgeon's world. The ship groans, the rum fumes sting your eyes, and the next broken soul stumbles into your lamplit circle. The hemp rope waiting, the mortar ready, the pestle cold and heavy in your grasp. The wounded boy screams, a raw, animal sound that shreds the air as you force the willow, poppy paste into his mouth. He bites down convulsively on the hemp rope, fibers fraying between his teeth. Crunch, scrape, crunch, scrape. You're already grinding again. This time, it's dried yarrow leaves. They're clean, slightly bitter. Chamomile, like scent a brief respite from the coppery blood and acrid sweat now saturating your corner. A burly gunner reels past, clutching a scalp wound that paints half his face crimson, roaring obscenities. Yarrow, aptly named soldier's woundwort, was prized for its staunching properties. Its leaves, ground and packed into wounds, helped slow bleeding, a crucial action when cautery irons weren't ready or couldn't reach. Your pestle moves faster, the rhythmic grinding becoming a frantic tattoo against the backdrop of battle noise, the shriek of splintering wood, the muffled crump of a grenade on the upper deck, the relentless, wet coughing of a man drowning in his own blood nearby. The mortar feels slick now, not just with paste, but with a fine spray of blood and seawater. The hemp rope binding your medicine chest digs into your hip as the ship lurches into another turn. The smell of tar is overpowering again, mixed with the stomach, churning stench of ruptured intestines from a man slumped against the bulkhead. You add a few precious drops of oil of cloves to the yarrow powder clove oil. With its potent eugenol, acted as a crude antiseptic and local anesthetic, numbing tissue before stitching or amputation, though its fiery bite was its own torture. The sharp, spicy, almost medicinal aroma cuts through the miasma for a fleeting second. Hold him. You bark at a wide-eyed powder monkey as you approach a man with a deep gash in his thigh, pulsing bright arterial blood. The boy throws his meager weight onto the sailor's thrashing legs. You pack the yarrow, clove paste deep into the wound, ignoring the man's guttural howl. The heat radiating from his skin is fierce. Fever is already setting in. You fumble for your knife, its blade dull from constant use, thinking of the bone saw hanging nearby. The mortar and pestle sit momentarily forgotten, coated in gore and herbs, the pestle lying across the mortar's rim like a fallen soldier. The rum bottle is knocked over, its pungent, fiery contents soaking into the deck planking, adding its sweet, wasteful stink to the hellish brew. A crash overhead, followed by a ragged cheer. Perhaps they've boarded the enemy. The sounds shift, becoming more chaotic, closer. Men stumble down the ladder, not just wounded now, but triumphant and bloodlust, drunk, swinging cutlasses. Their breath reeking of rum and violence. The tallow dip gutters wildly in the sudden draught, casting monstrous, leaping shadows. You grab the mortar, clutching its solid, grimy weight like a talisman, pulling your meager supplies closer. The hemp rope barrier feels flimsy against the surging tide of exhausted, wounded, and dangerously exhilarated men. Crunch, scrape. You start grinding dried feverfew now. Its dusty, bitter scent a promise for the burning foreheads you'll soon touch. Feverfew, long used for quotidian agues, fevers, was a mainstay against the malarial fevers that could decimate a crew after calling at tropical ports. The pestle is heavy in your tired hand, but its movement is automatic, a small act of order in the swirling, rum-scented, tar-thickened chaos. The shouts outside turn to a rhythmic chant, perhaps they've taken a prize. The sea serpent seems to settle, the violence of her movement easing. The immediate pressure of fresh wounded lessons, replaced by the low moans and whimpers of those already tended. The air remains thick with suffering and rum fumes. But the frantic edge dulls. You wipe your brow with a sleeve already stiff with blood and paste, leaving a streak of grime. The mortar, cradled between your knees now, feels like the only solid thing in a world adrift on pain and cheap liquor. The rough hemp of a nearby hanging net brushes your neck, a coarse caress. You reach for the valerian root, its earthy, musky, almost unpleasant smell promising sleep for the shattered men around you. The pestle grinds on, crunch, scrape, its sound merging with the creak of the damaged hull and the ragged breathing of the wounded. A grim lullaby for the aftermath. Silence, thick and sudden, presses down. The guns have ceased. Only the creak of the sea serpent's wounded timbers, the slap of water against her hull, and the low, agonized symphony of the wounded fill the gloom below decks. The battle is won, or lost, or simply moved elsewhere. The tallow dip burns low, casting long, trembling shadows over the scene of carnage in your corner. You slump back against a barrel, the rough hemp sacking cover scratching your neck. Exhaustion washes over you, a physical weight as heavy as your stone mortar. It sits on the deck before you, a grim chalice caked with layers of dried and fresh pastes, the dark willow, poppy sludge, the greenish, brown smear of yarrow and clove, the pale dust of feverfew. The pestle lies across it, stained and sticky. The smells are overwhelming, blood drying to a rusty tang, the lingering bite of gunpowder, sour sweat, the cloying sweetness of spilled rum soaking into the wood, and beneath it, stubbornly present, the hot, resinous reek of tar used to plug holes near the waterline. This omnipresent tar, derived from pine pitch, wasn't just for hull repairs. Ship surgeons sometimes used it in plasters or even as a crude, caustic sealant for severe wounds. Its pungent smoke also employed in fumigations below decks to combat foul airs. Your hands ache, stained dark with blood, herbs, and grime. You flex them, feeling the ghostly vibration of the pestle's rhythm. The immediate, screaming urgency has passed, replaced by the watchful dread of infection and fever. You eye your meager store of cleanish rags and the dwindling bottle of rum, more precious now as a wound wash than as drink. A man nearby shivers violently under a thin blanket, his teeth chattering despite the stifling heat. You reach for the mortar, it's cool. Rough surface familiar under your fingertips. With a weary hand, you scrape out the worst of the crusted mixtures. Cleaning these tools was vital. Though often rudimentary, seawater and sand might be used, but residues inevitably built up, potentially contaminating future remedies, a constant battle against sepsis waged in the mortar's bowl. You scoop fresh feverfew and a precious fragment of dried ginger root into the hollow. Ginger's sharp, spicy, slightly citrusy scent cuts briefly through the miasma, good for the shivers, for settling storm-tossed guts. Crunch, scrape. The sound is slower now, measured. The rhythmic motion is almost soothing, a point of focus amidst the suffering. The hemp rope binding the water barrel beside you digs into your back, but it's a grounding discomfort. You add a splash of vinegar, readily available aboard ship, was another versatile tool, used as a weak antiseptic wash, a preservative, and even internally to combat scurvy alongside precious limes or sauerkraut when available. The sharp, sour tang mingles aggressively with the ginger and feverfew. Outside your corner, the pirates are celebrating their survival. Raucous singing erupts, punctuated by the glug of rum from a fresh barrel broached on deck. The sweet, fiery smell drifts down, clashing with the medicinal and morbid scents below. Someone vomits noisily. The contrast is jarring, life roaring defiantly above, death whispering grimly below. You pour the ginger, feverfew, vinegar infusion into a battered tin cup and hold it to the shivering man's lips. He gulps it down, grimacing at the sour bite. The pestle rests heavy in your lax hand. The mortar sits empty, waiting for the next demand, the next desperate remedy. The sounds of celebration grow louder, a bawdy shanty about Spanish gold and willing tavern wenches. The rum smell is pervasive now, thick and cloying. The tar scent persists, a stubborn undertone. The stone tools, resting in the flickering half-light, seem like ancient relics of a forgotten, cleaner world. The rough hemp sacking scratches your neck again. A deep weariness settles into your bones, heavier than the stone mortar. The cries of the wounded have softened to whimpers or fallen silent. The pestle feels impossibly heavy to lift again. The acrid tang of the vinegar still stings your nostrils, but beneath it, the faint, clean ghost of the ginger root offers a fragile, fleeting promise of relief. The ship groans, a long, low sound of fatigue. The rum-soaked singing above becomes a distant drone, merging with the rhythmic lap of water against the hull. The tallow dip sputters, its light shrinking, deepening the shadows around the silent mortar and the waiting pestle, their work far from done, but momentarily paused in the rum. Thick, tar scented quiet of the pirate ship's wounded belly. Your chin dips towards your chest, the scratch of the hemp sacking a final, coarse whisper against your skin. The crunch, scrape of the pestle falters as Silas's head jerks up. Not a cry of pain this time, but a raw, guttural crack from above, the unmistakable sound of the mainmast yielding. The sea serpent shuddered violently, timbers shrieking like a dying thing. The lantern swung wildly, throwing grotesque, leaping shadows over the moaning wounded. A shower of dust and splinters rained down from the deckhead. The stone mortar, a sudden, treacherous weight, slid towards the edge of the makeshift table. Silas lunged, his blood-slicked palm smacking down on its cool, gritty surface just before it tumbled. The hemp rope securing the medicine chest behind him groaned under the strain of the ship's tortured list. These ropes, soaked in tar for preservation against rot and salt, were vital lifelines aboard ship, yet they're rough. Tar, stiffened fibers could inflict savage rope burns on frantic hands. The smell intensified fresh, split pine from the mast, the choking dust, the hot tar smell now laced with panic sweat, overwhelming even the rum and blood. All hands. Clear the wreckage. The bosun's roar, hoarse and desperate, cut through the groans below. The celebration above had shattered into chaos. Boots thundered overhead, frantic shouts mingling with the terrible groaning of strained wood and rigging. Silas shoved the mortar back to relative safety, his fingers finding the familiar grooves worn into the pestle's handle. A powder monkey, face white as a shroud, scrambled down the ladder. "Surgeon. Cap'n says brace below, she's wounded bad." The sea serpent wallowed, her movement sickeningly sluggish. Water began to seep up through the deck planking near the companionway, not down. The bilge stench surged, a cold, wet, organic foulness. Breaches below the waterline were a death sentence if not swiftly contained. Surgeons often worked ankle, deep in rising water, while carpenters fought with plugs and tarred canvas fothering. Sails dragged beneath the hull to stem the flow. Silas grabbed a roll of relatively clean linen bandages and a bottle of the strongest rum, not for mixing now, but for dousing. He sloshed it over his hands and forearms, the alcohol's fierce, sweet burn a shocking counterpoint to the creeping cold of the seawater around his boots. The sharp, clean scent cut through the miasma for a bare second. "You? Boy," he pointed to the powder monkey. "Hold this." He thrust the rum bottle and bandages into trembling hands. "And if you see water rising here," he kicked a sack of dried comfrey root. "Shout." He turned back to the shivering gunner, whose thigh wound was now weeping a suspicious yellow puss. Fever burned in the man's eyes. Silas scooped the last of the ginger, feverfew paste from the mortar, forcing it between cracked lips. Crunch, scrape. He was grinding again, faster now. Not willow, not yarrow. Dried goldenrod this time, its faint, hay-like scent barely perceptible. Goldenrod, solid ago. Often carried as woundwort, was believed to promote healing and reduce inflammation in festering sores, though its efficacy against rampant infection was tragically limited. He mixed it with a precious dollop of honey, valued for its viscosity and mild antiseptic properties, was a common base for poultices applied to putrid wounds, forming a protective, drawing layer. The mortar felt slippery in his seawater, wet grip. The pestle's rhythmic assault was a drumbeat against the rising tide of despair. He packed the sticky goldenrod, honey mixture onto the angry wound, ignoring the man's weak curse. The smell of corruption fought with the honey's cloying sweetness and the rum's lingering fumes. Above, the sounds changed. The frantic chopping and dragging lessened. A tense, waiting silence descended, broken only by the gurgle of water and the creak of overstressed timber. Then, a ragged cheer, thin, exhausted, but genuine. They'd stemmed the worst. The sea serpent's list seemed to stabilize, though the water on the deck below still swirled around Silas's ankles, icy and accusing. Dawn's first gray light, pale and unwelcome, seeped down the companionway. It revealed the full horror of the surgeon's corner: blood, soaked rags, discarded bandages floating like gruesome lilies. The ashen faces of the wounded, the mortar and pestle sitting like grim idols amidst the wreckage, coated in honey, herbs, and grime. The hemp rope barrier had snapped, its frayed ends dangling. The smell was a nauseating cocktail: blood, bile, honey, rum, seawater, tar, and the pervasive, sweet rot stench of infected flesh. Silas sagged against the water barrel, the rough hemp sacking scraping his cheek. The cold water soaked through his breeches. The pestle slipped from his numb fingers, landing with a dull thunk in the mortar's bowl, stirring the dregs of the honeyed paste. He stared at his hands, stained, trembling, cut by splinters. The stone tools, illuminated by the feeble dawn light filtering through the rising water vapor, looked ancient, primordial. They had been instruments of desperate hope, of brutal pragmatism. They had measured out pain relief, fought infection, offered futile comfort. The sheer physical labor of grinding herbs for hours, often while the ship pitched violently, was an exhausting, essential part of the surgeon's grim duty, demanding strength as much as knowledge. The sounds from above were subdued now, orders given quietly, the rhythmic clank of the pumps working double time, the weary tread of exhausted men. The sweet, fiery reek of rum was fainter, replaced by the damp, salty chill of near disaster and the relentless, metallic tang of blood. The tar smell was a distant memory. He didn't reach for more herbs. Not yet. He simply breathed, the air thick and cold in his lungs. The crunch, scrape was silent. The mortar and pestle rested, heavy with use and the weight of the night's suffering, in the rising gray light of the pirate ship's wounded dawn. The rough hemp of the sacking was the only texture against his skin, a coarse anchor in the numb exhaustion. The next broken man would come. The pestle would grind again. But for this fragile moment, in the cold, wet silence punctuated only by the pumps and ragged breathing, the stone sat still, its bowl a cold, gritty hollow reflecting the gray dawn, seeping into the sea serpent's battered belly. The scent of honey clung stubbornly to his fingers, a sickly, sweet counterpoint to the salt and decay, as the water lapped gently around his boots. The cold seawater swirled around Silas's ankles, a relentless, icy reminder of the sea serpent's fragile state. The rhythmic clank, thud of the chain pumps was the ship's new heartbeat, a desperate, mechanical counterpoint to the ragged breathing of the wounded. Dawn's gray light, filtering through the companionway, did little to warm the hold. It only illuminated the devastation in stark, unforgiving detail: floating debris, blood-streaked timbers, the pale, sweating faces of men locked in silent battles with pain and fever. Silas pushed himself upright, the rough hemp sacking scraping his raw cheek. His legs protested, stiff and cold. The mortar and pestle sat where he'd left them, the pestle resting askew in the bowl, coated in a congealed mess of goldenrod paste, honey, and seawater. The shivering gunner he'd treated moaned, his legs swollen and angry around the packed wound. The smell of corruption, a sickly, sweet, cloying stench, was stronger now, cutting through the damp, salt air and the fading ghost of rum. Gangrene was the pirate surgeon's greatest dread, a swift and usually fatal sentence in the fetid, bacteria-laden confines of a wooden ship, often spreading faster than any remedy could counter. He needed vinegar, strong vinegar. He fumbled for the jug, finding it miraculously intact near the snapped hemp rope barrier. The sharp, acidic tang was a welcome assault as he sloshed it liberally over his hands and forearms, then poured a stream directly onto the gunner's inflamed wound. The man screamed, a hoarse, broken sound, arching off the makeshift palate. Vinegar douches were a common, brutal attempt to cleanse putrefying wounds. Its acidity intended to kill the laudable puss believed sleaze incorrectly to be part of healing, while actually causing searing pain. The smell of sour wine battled the gangrene's sweetness. Crunch, scrape. He was grinding again, his movements stiff but driven by a grim momentum. Into the mortar went dried, brittle sage leaves, their pungent, camphorous scent a fleeting breath of clean herb gardens. Sage, Salvia officinalis, was prized for its perceived drying properties and mild antiseptic qualities, often used in attempts to combat infection and reduce feverish sweats. He added a pinch of precious, powdered dragon's blood resin. This dark red resin, harvested from dracana trees, wasn't blood but was believed to staunch bleeding and draw out corruption. Its earthy, slightly smoky scent added to the medicinal fog. The mixture looked like dried blood in the mortar. He splashed more vinegar in, creating a thin, acrid paste. Ignoring the gunner's whimpers, he packed it over the vinegar-washed wound, replacing the honeyed goldenrod. A commotion erupted near the ladder. Two pirates half carried, half dragged a third man down. Not wounded by steel or shot, but by splinters. A jagged piece of oak, thick as a man's wrist and longer than his forearm, was embedded deep in his side, just below the ribs. His face was the color of tallow, his breath coming in shallow, wet gasps. They laid him on a relatively dry patch of decking, the wood groaning in protest. Surgeon. Jeb took the mast fall for it hit water. One panted, his eyes wide with the horror of it. Silas stared. This was beyond poultices and pasts. This needed the saw, the knife, the hot tar or iron, and a steadier ship than the wounded serpent. The man's breathing bubbled faintly. A lung was likely pierced. The stone mortar felt suddenly alien in his hands, utterly inadequate. He set it down with a thud, the pestle rattling. Faced with massive trauma like impalement, a ship surgeon's options were horrifyingly limited. Extraction often caused fatal bleeding, leaving it in risked fatal infection, a grim lose scenario. The thick, coppery smell of fresh internal blood joined the olfactory hellscape. Rum, Silas rasped, not looking away from the ghastly wound. Someone thrust a bottle into his hand, the good stuff this time, taken from the prize. Its sweet, fiery scent incongruously pleasant. He poured a generous amount straight into the injured man's mouth. Jeb choked, swallowed convulsively. For the pain, Jeb, Silas muttered, though it was likely more for the onlookers. He poured more over the entry point of the splinter, washing away some blood, the alcohol mingling with the visceral scent. He couldn't pull it. Not here. Not now. Keep him still. Warm as you can. It was a death sentence, gently spoken. He turned away, the rough hemp of his own sleeve rough against his lips as he wiped his face. His gaze fell back on his mortar. Not for Jeb. For the others. For the feverish gunner. For the man with the shattered arm now whimpering in the corner. For the dozen lesser cuts and bruises that could still turn deadly. He scooped dried elderflowers into the bowl. Elderflowers, Sambucus nigra, were a staple for reducing fevers and soothing coughs. Often brewed as elderflower tea, a rare gentle remedy in the surgeon's harsh arsenal. Crunch, scrape. The motion was automatic, a talisman against the helplessness. The clean, slightly floral scent was drowned almost instantly by the surrounding miasma of blood, vinegar, gangrene, and rum. The chain pumps clanked on. The gray light strengthened, revealing dust motes dancing in the shafts of pale sun. The celebratory rum smell from above was gone, replaced by the smell of wet wood, exhaustion, and despair. The tar scent lingered only as a memory beneath the overwhelming stench of the hold. Silas mixed the elderflower powder with the last dregs of cleanish water in a tin cup. He moved among the wounded, trickling the tepid infusion between cracked lips. It was little more than a gesture, a bitter comfort. He returned to his corner. The mortar was empty again, stained with the ghosts of a dozen desperate remedies. The pestle lay heavy beside it. The hemp rope barrier was gone, snapped. He leaned back against the tar, stained hull, the wood cold and damp through his threadbare shirt. The clank, thud of the pumps was slowing, the crew spent. Jeb's wet, bubbling breaths grew fainter, then stopped. No one spoke. The silence that followed was heavier than the sea pressing against the hull. Silas closed his eyes. The stone mortar felt cold and inert against his thigh. The pestle, a leaden weight. The smells, the fading elderflower, the overwhelming corruption, the sour vinegar, the metallic blood, the stale rum, pressed in, thick and suffocating. The rough texture of the hemp sacking on the barrel, the only thing he'd leaned against for hours, was imprinted on his skin. There were no more herbs to grind, no more pastes to mix for Jeb. Only the weight. The wait for the next fever to spike, the next wound to fester, the next desperate cry in the gloom. The sea serpent groaned, a deep, wounded sound. The chain pumps fell silent, in the sudden, profound quiet, broken only by the lap of water against wood inside the hull and the ragged sighs of broken men. The mortar and pestle sat like ancient, blood-stained stones on the sodden deck, their grinding song momentarily stilled in the exhausted, putrid dawn. The coarseness of the hemp fibers embedded in the deck planking scratched his palm as he rested his hand, the only sensation besides the crushing weight of salt water and futility rising around him. The mortar and pestle grow cold and heavy in Silas's numb hands, their stone surfaces gritty with dried paste, salt, and the metallic taint of blood no vinegar can score clean. The sharp, cloying sweetness of gangrene and honey clings stubbornly to the air, a noxious shroud over the surgeon's corner, mingling with the sour tang of vinegar and the damp, rotten egg stench of the flooded bilge. Jeb's final, wet sigh hangs in the silence, heavier than the seawater still sloshing around Silas's boots. The frantic clank, thud of the chain pumps has ceased. Only the wary creak of the sea serpent's wounded timbers and the low, feverish moans of the remaining wounded remain. Dawn's gray light, weak and indifferent, reveals the full extent of the carnage. The stained mortar resting on a floating plank, the snapped hemp rope barrier drifting like seaweed, the ashen faces of men surrendered to pain or the creeping chill. The pungent reek of overproof rum is a distant memory, replaced by the pervasive, cold smell of salt water, decay, and despair. Silas doesn't lift the pestle again. His strength, like the ship's, is spent. He slumps back against the tar, stained hull, the rough, damp wood cold through his thin shirt. The stone mortar rests heavily on his thigh, its familiar weight now an anchor to exhaustion. The intricate whorls and grooves of the pestle's handle, worn smooth by generations of desperate grinding before him, feel alien under his blood-crusted fingers. These tools, passed down or scavenged, were often a ship surgeon's most valuable, tangible link to a fragile, thread of healing knowledge in an era where infection was a death sentence and major trauma meant almost certain doom. He stares at the empty bowl. The willow bark for pain, the yarrow for blood, the goldenrod for corruption, the feverfew for heat, the poppy for oblivion, all ground to dust, mixed with rum and hope, and found wanting against the night's savage arithmetic. The smells begin to blur. The putrid wound, the sharp vinegar, the lingering ghost of herbs, the cold salt, the wet wood. They merge into a single, heavy blanket of defeat. The sounds fade too, the moans soften, the ship's groans deepen into a long, exhausted sigh. Even the lap of water inside the hull seems to quieten, absorbed by the immense, silent weight of the ocean outside. The coarse hemp of a nearby sack, half submerged, brushes his limp hand, its familiar roughness the last distinct sensation against his skin. He doesn't pull away. The tar smell, once so sharp and vital, is just a faint, bitter memory beneath the salt and rot. Silas's chin drops to his chest. His eyes close, not in sleep, but in a surrender deeper than fatigue. The stone mortar slips slightly on his leg, its cool solidity the last point of contact with a world of grinding, mixing, and futile battle against the inevitable. The pestle lies beside it, a silent companion in surrender. The vibrant, terrifying chaos of the pirate surgeon's world dissolves into the cold, wet, quiet gray of the sea serpent's wounded dawn. The intricate knowledge held within the mortar's bowl, the properties of sage, the sting of clove, the narcotic promise of poppy, fades like the rum fumes. Only the immense, patient sigh of the deep remains, and the cold, unyielding stone against his thigh. Silas Thorne's world fades into the groaning timbers and the salt-stung silence of spent remedies. Carry this piece of deep, ocean stillness, and the quiet end of struggle within you sleep. Well, Time Weaver. Gather your dreams, wary traveler, tonight. We sail to the heart of the scientific revolution. Feel the cool, precise weight of brass instruments beneath your fingers. Breathe in the dry, dusty whisper of ancient parchment, steeped in candle wax and cosmic dust. And let history rock you to sleep beneath the vaulted ceiling of Uraniborg, where the heavens yield their secrets. Your eyelids grow heavy as the vast, Danish night settles over Hven, deep in ink, black save for the diamond scatter of stars. You are Tycho Brahe, Lord of Uraniborg, master of the celestial spheres. Silence reigns in your great observatory, thick and profound, broken only by the faint tick of an intricate clockwork mechanism, and the soft, rhythmic scratch of your quill. Before you, dominating the lamplit gloom, stands your most treasured instrument, the great celestial globe, crafted from wood and plaster, its surface meticulously overlaid with thin sheets of brass engraved with the precise positions of over 1,000 stars. This globe was the culmination of decades of nightly observation, a three-dimensional map of the heavens unmatched in its time. Your fingers, tracing the smooth, cool brass of a sextant's calibrated limb, pause to brush the globe's polished surface. It feels substantial, real, a tangible counterpoint to the ethereal brilliance burning outside the open observation slit. The scent is profound, the dry, slightly sweet aroma of centuries, old parchment star catalogs piled beside you, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the brass instruments, the hot tallow scent of the guttering lamp, and the crisp, frost-laden air flowing in from the night. These brass instruments, quadrants, sextants, armillary spheres, were not merely decorative. Their precise engravings and finely pivoted limbs allowed Brahe to measure stellar positions with unprecedented accuracy, often to within 1 arcminute. laying the foundation for Kepler's laws. You adjust the sextant's sight, its brass cool against your brow, and peer through the narrow slit. There, Vega, blazing in Lyra. You note its position relative to the horizon, the familiar ritual calming the mind. The silence is a living thing, wrapping around you like velvet. Below, the faint, rhythmic crash of the Öresund waves against the island shore provides a distant, grounding bass note. The celestial globe, bathed in the warm, flickering lamplight, seems to hum with captured starlight. Its engraved constellations, Draco coiling, Cygnus soaring frozen in eternal dance. Unlike earlier celestial models based on Ptolemy or poetic myth, Brahe's globe incorporated his own revolutionary observations, including the detailed mapping of the supernova of 1572, Stella Novae, which shattered the Aristotelian notion of the immutable heavens. You turn the massive globe slowly on its axis with a practiced hand, its wood and brass cool and smooth. The brass meridian ring gleams dully. Finding the engraved position of Vega, you meticulously transfer the fresh observation onto a parchment. Chart spread on the heavy oak table, the quill scratching like a tiny insect in the immense quiet. The smell of the ink, sharp, mineral, and woody, briefly overpowers the parchment and brass. The weight of the sextant is a comforting anchor in your hand, its precision a bulwark against the chaotic vastness above. Outside, the stars seem impossibly bright, sharp enough to pierce the soul. The familiar constellations are old friends, their positions etched into your being as deeply as into the brass. Yet, the challenge remains to pin them down, to know their movements with absolute certainty, to build an unshakable model of God's clockwork universe. The rhythmic scratch of the quill resumes, a tiny counterpoint to the patient wheeling of the stars beyond the slit, the cool brass instruments resting heavy and ready on their stands. The celestial globe a silent, gleaming testament to human perseverance under the infinite night sky. The frosty air nips at your cheeks, a welcome sharpness keeping the mind alert as the great globe's shadow stretches long across the parchment sea of stars. The night deepens. The tallow lamp sputters, its light shrinking, intensifying the shadows that dance across the intricate curves of the armillary sphere standing sentinel beside the great globe. You replenish the oil, the brief flare illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny, chaotic universes before settling back into the warm, intimate pool of light. The scent of hot oil mingles afresh with the parchment's dry wisdom. You reach for the massive brass azimuthal quadrant, its engraved scale gleaming faintly. Its weight is solid, demanding respect as you men over it towards the open aperture. The cold metal bites slightly through your thin gloves. This specific quadrant, mounted on a sturdy stone pier aligned true north-south, allowed Brahe to measure a star's altitude and azimuth simultaneously with exceptional stability, crucial for his unparalleled positional accuracy. You sight along the Alidade, its finely ruled sights finding the steady gleam of Polaris, the pivot of the northern sky, the familiar ritual aligning the instrument, reading the finely engraved scales by lamplight, recording the angles on fresh parchment is hypnotic, a meditation in brass and starlight. The silence is so complete you can hear the faint contraction of the metal as it cools further in the night air, a tiny ping echoing in the stone chamber. The celestial globe stands nearby, its silent presence a constant reference. You trace the engraved path of Mars, that troublesome wanderer, its retrograde motion a persistent thorn in the side of cosmic models. Brahe's meticulous, multi-year tracking of Mars's complex path provided the precise data Johannes Kepler would later use to deduce the planet moved in an elliptical orbit. Not the perfect circles demanded by ancient dogma. The dry parchment scent seems stronger now, layered with the memory of countless nights. Countless observations recorded in your precise hand. A faint H settles in your shoulders from maintaining the quadrant's position. The cool brass a counterpoint to the building fatigue. Outside, the wind has stilled. The only sounds are the relentless tick of the clock, measuring earthly time against celestial eternity, the soft scratch of your quill, and the distant, rhythmic sigh of the sea. The vastness of the cosmos, usually a source of exhilarating wonder, feels tonight like a comfortable cloak. Its patterns knowable, its secrets yielding slowly to the patient interrogation of brass and human intellect. The instruments, quadrant, sextant, globe, are not just tools. They are extensions of your will, conduits to understanding. The cool touch of the brass alidade against your cheek as you squint through the sight is a grounding connection to the tangible world, even as your mind soars among the fixed stars. The celestial globe, catching the low lamplight, seems to glow with an inner luminescence, its engraved stars whispering their ancient stories to the quiet room. The scent of old knowledge and hot oil is the scent of progress. One painstaking measurement at a time. The frosty air bites again, sharpening your focus as you turn the quadrant towards a new target. The brass whispering against its mounting, the night's silent work continuing under the watchful gaze of the engraved heavens. A subtle shift in the quality of darkness beyond the observation slit signals the approach of dawn's first, imperceptible blush. The stars, though still fiercely bright, seem to hold their breath. You lower the heavy quadrant, the brass cool and heavy in your grasp, its intricate engravings momentarily catching the guttering lamplight. A deep weariness settles into your bones, a pleasant ache born of concentrated stillness. The celestial globe, your silent companion through the long watches, seems to absorb the fading starlight. Its engraved constellations Cassiopeia's throne, Orion's belt dimming as the sky pales. Uraniborg itself, Brahe's island fortress of science, was equipped with cutting-edge instruments funded by King Frederick II. Its design incorporated large, stable observing platforms and dedicated workshops for constructing and calibrating the essential brass tools. The smell of the chamber is layered now. The dominant dry parchment, the underlying metallic tang, the stale tallow smoke, the lingering hint of the linseed oil used to polish the brass, and the ever-present, crisp scent of the retreating night air. You carefully cap the inkwell, the sharp mineral scent receding. The quill rests beside the latest stack of observations. The parchment pages covered in neat columns of numbers and annotations, still smelling faintly of oak gall and iron. The brass sextant lies cool and inert on its stand. The rhythmic tick of the clock continues, a steady heartbeat in the quiet. The distant sea's murmur grows slightly louder as the world stirs. You stand before the great celestial globe, placing a hand flat upon the cool, smooth brass of the Antarctic Circle. It feels solid, real. A perfect sphere crafted by human hands to mirror the divine geometry above. The effort of the night settles upon you, the intense focus, the meticulous recording, the sheer physical presence required to handle the heavy instruments in the cold. Despite his geocentric model, where the Sun orbited Earth, but other planets orbited the Sun, Brahe's star catalog, painstakingly compiled using instruments like these, remained the most accurate for over a century. Even after the telescope's invention, the silence deepens as the lamp finally gutters out, leaving only the pale, pre-dawn gray light seeping into the chamber. The brass instruments lose their gleam, becoming dark, complex silhouettes against the stone walls. The celestial globe fades into a large, mysterious orb, its engraved secrets hidden in the gloom. The familiar scent of the parchment is a comfort, the smell of work accomplished, knowledge secured. The cool brass of the globe's meridian ring beneath your fingertips is the last distinct sensation. The vast intellectual endeavor, the pursuit of cosmic order, gently recedes. The rhythmic sigh of the sea blends with the fading echo of the clock's tick. The immense, ordered beauty of the observed heavens settles in your mind, not as a puzzle to be solved in this moment, but as a profound, silent presence. Your gaze lingers on the fading stars visible through the slit, then drops to the shadowed globe. The instruments rest. The parchment awaits the next night. The cool, smooth brass under your hand, the dry whisper of ancient knowledge in the air, the deep, satisfied fatigue in your limbs, they weave together into a tapestry of quiet completion. The first bird call, tentative and distant, pierces the stillness outside. The brass feels like an anchor, holding you steady as the world slowly turns towards the sun, the celestial globe a silent, weighty testament to the night's communion with the infinite. Its presence a solid promise in the gathering dawn light. The dry parchment scent mingles with the faint, clean promise of approaching day as the last visible star, Venus perhaps, winks out in the brightening east. The celestial globe's brass meridians felt cool as Brahe's hand lingered, but dawn's insistence was undeniable. Pale gold light now streamed through the eastern observation slit, etching long rectangles across the stone floor, banishing the intimate pool of lamplight where the instruments had reigned. The scent shifted subtly. The dry parchment and hot tallow were overlaid by the crisp, green fragrance of dew, drenched herbs from Uraniborg's gardens below, carried on a faint, rising breeze. The great brass quadrant, released from its nightly vigil, stood silent, its shadow stretching long and thin. The tick of the clock continued its patient measure of mundane time. Uraniborg wasn't merely an observatory. Beneath its elegant floors lay alchemical laboratories, and a furnace capable of casting the very brass instruments Tycho relied upon, blending astronomy with the quest for material transformation. Brahe moved stiffly, the night's stillness settling into his joints. He didn't seek rest yet. Dawn was for reckoning, for turning the night's harvest into enduring knowledge. He carefully lifted the stack of parchment sheets, still smelling faintly of oak gall, ink, and the night's cool air, and carried them to a broad table, near a south-facing window. Here, the morning light was clean and sharp, perfect for scrutiny. His fingers, chilled from handling cold brass all night, traced the columns of numbers, altitudes, azimuths, timings painstakingly recorded for Mars, for Vega, for countless fixed stars. He reached for his celestial globe, its imposing presence now illuminated by natural light. The engraved stars, so luminous in lamplight, were precise, delicate scratches in the brass under the sun. Brahe's star catalogue, Uranometria, aimed for unprecedented precision. He corrected the positions of hundreds of stars recorded since Ptolemy, often by significant fractions of a degree, relying solely on his naked eye observations in these brass marvels. He rotated the globe slowly, its axis whispering on well-oiled pivots, finding the engraved position of Mars from last night's final observation. He cross-referenced it with his notes. A slight frown creased his brow. The planet's position deviated minutely, yet persistently, from the predicted path based solely on circular orbits. The brass sextant, lying nearby, caught the sunlight, its engraved scale momentarily blinding. He picked it up, not to observe, but to feel its familiar, precise weight. A talisman against cosmic disorder. The metal was warming now, losing the deep chill of the night. The scent of the parchment deepened in the sunlight, releasing its ancient, papery breath. He dipped a fresh quill, its point sharp, the shaft smooth, into the inkwell. The rhythmic scratch resumed, but this was a different cadence, calculating, synthesizing, transferring raw data onto master charts. He plotted Mars's errant position, adding it to the growing, complex tapestry of dots that traced its path across the vellum sky. This relentless tracking of Mars, demanding nightly vigilance for years, created a dataset so accurate that Johannes Kepler, working as Brahe's assistant later, would use it to shatter the dogma of perfect circular orbits, proving instead the elliptical paths of planets. The warmth of the sun on his back was welcome, a counterpoint to the cool brass instruments resting nearby. He adjusted the heavy globe slightly, aligning its engraved ecliptic with his chart. The brass meridian ring, warmed by his touch, felt solid, a frame for the heavens. Outside, the sounds of the waking island intruded gently. The distant clang from the instrument workshop, the murmur of assistants in the herbarium, the cry of a gull over the El Resund, the profound silence of the star. Watch was replaced by the quiet hum of intellectual industry. He paused, rubbing his eyes. The phantom ache of his lost nose bridge, replaced by a prosthesis of gold and copper alloy, was a familiar throb after long concentration. The cool touch of the metal, when he unconsciously adjusted it, was strangely grounding. He walked back to the great equatorial armillary sphere near the center of the room, its nested brass rings gleaming. Running a finger along the smooth, cool path of the ecliptic ring, he contemplated the sheer complexity it represented. Armillary spheres like this weren't just display pieces. They were functional models of the cosmos, used to visualize and calculate celestial motions, according to Brahe's unique Tychonic system. Earth central. Sun orbiting Earth, other planets orbiting the Sun. The scent of linseed oil used to polish the brass, mingled with the parchment and herbs. The challenge wasn't just observation. It was fitting the dance of the heavens into a coherent, mathematically sound model. The brass instruments provided the notes. His task was to compose the symphony. The morning advanced. Sunlight now fully flooded the southern part of the chamber, warming the stone flags. The celestial globe stood like a silent oracle, holding the captured light of 1,000 nights. The brass sextant and quadrant, their work done until dusk, seemed to rest, absorbing the daylight warmth. The pile of annotated charts grew beside Brahe. The dry, scholarly scent of ink and parchment was the scent of progress, of chaos slowly yielding to order under the patient pressure of intellect and brass. The coolness of the instruments was fading, replaced by the ambient warmth of the day, but their precise forms remained, complex silhouettes against the sunlit wall, constant, reliable, extensions of his will to comprehend the infinite. The rhythmic scratch of the quill was the only sound in his focused world, weaving the night's cold starlight into the warm, enduring tapestry of human knowledge. The distant seaside, a constant reminder of the world beyond the brass and parchment, yet perfectly in harmony with the quiet, relentless work of mapping the heavens from a small island fortress of reason. The meridian ring of the armillary sphere felt warm under his palm now, a brass sun captured within the chamber as he prepared to plot another point on Mars's perplexing journey. The afternoon sun slanted low, gilding the brass meridian ring of the celestial globe and warming the stone flags where Tycho stood. Mars's persistent deviation gnawed at the edge of his profound satisfaction. The parchment charts, covered in precise dots and calculated arcs, lay spread like a patient's chart revealing a stubborn fever. The scent in the chamber had shifted again. The dominant parchment now mingled with the faint, metallic warmth of sun-heated brass and the distant, yeasty aroma of bread baking in the castle kitchens below. He carefully rolled the master chart, its surface still slightly tacky from the ink, and secured it with a silk ribbon smelling faintly of lavender, stored with the parchments to deter pests. Brahe employed a team of skilled assistants and students. The nightly observations and complex calculations required for his star catalog demanded collaborative effort, transforming Uraniborg into a unique early research institute. He moved towards the great equatorial armillary sphere, its nested rings complex and beautiful. Running a hand along the cool brass of the ecliptic path, he visualized Mars's errant dance. The instrument, polished to a soft gleam by an assistant that morning, reflected the fading sunlight. This specific armillary, with rings precisely aligned to the celestial equator and ecliptic, allowed Brahe to directly measure a star or planet's declination and right ascension coordinates fundamental to his catalog. He adjusted a finely calibrated sighting vane, its tiny aperture perfectly centered, a testament to the instrument maker's art flourishing in Uraniborg's workshops. The brass felt smooth, almost warm from the sun, yet still held an underlying coolness, a promise of the night to come. As dusk began to stain the sky indigo beyond the observation slits, a flurry of quiet activity resumed. Assistants entered, their footsteps hushed on the stone. One carefully extinguished the remaining daylight, reflecting surfaces with soft cloths. Another replenished the oil in the lamps bracketing the great quadrant. The sharp, clean scent of fresh linseed oil briefly cutting through the parchment and brass. A third meticulously checked the alignment of the massive azimuthal quadrant's stone pier with a delicate plumb line, its brass bob swaying infinitesimally before settling. Maintaining instrument alignment was a constant battle. Temperature changes, settling foundations, and even the Earth's subtle tremors could introduce tiny errors requiring nightly correction. The dry parchment scent deepened as Tycho consulted his annotated copy of Ptolemy's Almagest, its pages brittle and smelling of centuries, comparing an ancient star position against his own recent observation of the same star, noted on a fresh sheet smelling sharply of new ink. Darkness gathered swiftly. The first stars pricked through the deepening blue like scattered diamond dust. The assistants retreated, leaving Tycho alone once more with the silent, expectant brass. He approached the open north, facing slit. The crisp, frost-tinged night air flowed in, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and distant pine from the island. It washed over him, clearing the lingering warmth of the day, and the close, scholarly smells. He breathed deeply, the cold sharp in his lungs. The celestial globe stood nearby, a dark, massive orb in the gloom, its engraved stars waiting for lamplight to reveal them. He lifted the heavy sextant, its familiar, precise weight cool and grounding in his hands. The brass felt alive with potential under his touch. He fitted the eyepiece, the metal cool against his brow bone, near the edge of his golden nasal prosthesis. Brahe's insistence on extremely accurate timekeeping was revolutionary. His clocks, some driven by springs, others by weights, were among the most precise of the age, crucial for correlating observations taken minutes or hours apart. The rhythmic tick, tick, tick of the principal observatory clock began its nightly vigil, a mechanical heartbeat against the vast silence. He sighted on Capella, burning low in the northeast. The familiar ritual aligned the sights, fine, tune the micrometer screw, its tiny brass threads cool under his fingertips. Read the engraved scale by the light of the shielded lamp one assistant had left burning. Scratch, scratch went the quill on the fresh parchment. The scent of the ink, sharp and mineral, was brief, quickly absorbed by the dry air and the pervasive smell of the brass instruments and the cold stone. He turned, the sextant's weight balanced expertly, and sighted on Mars, a distinct, angry red spark in the constellation Pisces. He measured its altitude, its azimuth. The numbers flowed onto the parchment. He glanced at the celestial globe, its surface now dimly illuminated. Mars's engraved position felt wrong. Anticipated, he moved to the Great Quadrant, its cold brass limbs awaiting his command. The metal bit through his gloves as he adjusted the massive instrument, its movements smooth, but requiring significant effort. The sheer size and weight of Brahe's instruments, like the 5-foot radius quadrant, weren't for show. Larger instruments meant finer graduations could be engraved on their scales, allowing for more precise angular measurements. He sighted along the alidade, finding Mars again. The process repeated alignment, fine adjustment, reading the scales, recording. The numbers confirmed the sextant's reading. The deviation persisted. A flicker not of frustration, but of intense curiosity sparked within him. The cosmos held a mystery. The night deepened. The familiar constellations wheeled with majestic slowness. Tycho moved between instruments, sextant, quadrant, the great equatorial armillary, cross, checking, measuring reference stars, timing Mars's passage with the relentless tick of the clocks. The cold intensified, frosting the stone near the open slits and making the brass instruments almost painfully cold to touch without gloves. His breath plumed in the lamplight. The scents were pure now, the dominant, clean metallic tang of the cold brass, the dry whisper of the parchment beneath his hand, the faint, oily warmth of the lamps, and the ever-present, invigorating cold of the night air. The rhythmic scratch of the quill, the occasional soft clink of brass against brass, the steady clockwork tick, these were the only sounds in his communion with the spheres. The celestial globe stood as a silent, gleaming witness, its own engraved Mars a fixed point on a perfect sphere, while the true planet wandered stubbornly off its predicted course. The cool brass of the quadrant's sight against his cheek was a constant, grounding presence, a bridge between the chill vastness outside and the focused, warm pool of light and intellect within. The anomaly wasn't an error. It was a whisper from the heavens, a subtle clue written in light and motion, demanding even greater precision, even deeper patience. The vast, ordered sky felt not chaotic, but complex, intricate, worthy of the relentless pursuit embodied in the cold, precise brass cradled in his hands and gleaming softly around him. The distant sigh of the sea was the only other voice in the profound stillness. As he raised the sextant once more, the engraved scales catching the lamplight like frozen constellations, ready to capture another fragment of Mars's untold story. The cold brass felt like an extension of his own resolve, cool and unyielding against the infinite, beckoning night. The celestial globe grows heavy and cool beneath Brahe's hand. Its brass meridians losing their dawn, warmed gleam as the last sliver of starlight fades from the eastern sky. The intricate engravings of Cygnus and Draco blur in his wary sight. The astronomer's world fades into the rhythmic sigh of the eye, resund against Avon's shore, and the final, resonant tick of the observatory clock falling silent carry, this piece of measured heavens and patient brass within you. Sleep well, time, weaver. The vast, silent chamber of Uraniborg settles into the quiet of full dawn. The scent of old parchment, dry, sweet, and infinitely patient, lingers strongest now, overlaying the fading metallic tang of the great brass quadrant and armillary sphere. The celestial globe stands sentinel, a polished orb holding the frozen fire of 1,000 mapped stars within its darkened surface. The cool touch of its brass meridian ring beneath Tycho's palm is the last anchor to the fading night. The grooves of the engraved constellations. A final, fading impression against his skin. This globe, a culmination of decades of naked eye observation, remained the most accurate representation of the heavens until the advent of the telescope, a testament to the power of human diligence and precision instrumentation. The heavy brass instruments, the sextant resting on its stand, the quadrant aimed slackly at the brightening sky, the complex rings of the armillary sphere absorb the growing daylight, no longer tools of interrogation, but silent monuments to the night's labor. Their coolness seeps into the stone floor, relinquishing the borrowed warmth of lamplight and human touch. The sharp scent of oak gall ink on the latest parchment charts mellows, merging with the ancient, papery breath of Ptolemy's almagest lying closed nearby. The profound silence deepens, broken only by the distant cry of a gull and the soft rustle of a breeze stirring parchments on the table, a whisper of cosmic dust settling. Exhaustion, deep in bone, satisfying, flows over Tycho like the tide. The relentless focus, the minute calibrations, the sheer physical presence required to command the heavy brass through the cold night, ebbs away. The phantom H of his metal nose bridge is a familiar throb, a cold point against his cheek in the cool air. The deviation of Mars, that tantalizing celestial whisper, no longer gnaws but rests within the meticulously recorded columns of numbers, a puzzle for the sunlit hours. The data painstakingly gathered this night, and thousands like it, would become the unshakable foundation upon which Kepler would later discern the elliptical truth of planetary motion, shattering celestial spheres forever. The dry parchment scent, the underlying coolness of brass, the faintest memory of linseed oil, and the clean, damp breath of the morning air through the slit weave together into a tapestry of profound stillness. The rhythmic crash of the waves becomes a lullaby. The instruments, complex silhouettes against the sunlit stone, stand as guardians of the conquered night. The immense, ordered vault of the observed heavens, no longer a demanding puzzle in this moment, settles in his mind as a deep, resonant presence, a silent symphony mapped in brass and ink. His gaze, heavy-lidded, drifts from the shadowed globe to the brightening rectangle of the eastern slit. The brass sextant, catching the first direct ray of sun, glints once, fiercely, then softens into warm gold. The last distinct sensation is the cool, smooth solidity of the globe beneath his hand, the dry whisper of knowledge secured, and the immense, quiet weight of the cosmos, understood, and yet forever mysterious, drawing him down. The scent of old wisdom and polished metal mingles with the promise of dew as consciousness gently releases its hold on the brass. And the silent, waiting stars. The celestial globe remains, a heavy, polished world within the world, its cold brass meridians a final, grounding touch before the deep ocean of sleep rises.